You have said before, in fact, I think it was last Christmas, you had all the people from 15 years old to like 20 years old stand up, and then you say, pick any man and woman from that group and put on them the hope of the world. I've always thought Joseph was old, and I wondered if you have any historical evidence to demonstrate that he was not.
Dale, you're amazing. The second question he's just asking is the ages of Joseph and Mary. And so I will say two things. I have no idea, and the Bible doesn't say. Okay? But it would be just like in our culture today, people are getting married later and later and later. Professionals, the median age for professionals, if they ever get married and don't live together perpetually with whoever they want, is late 20s. That's our culture. Yet, a generation or two ago, the median, so there's a cultural median age of marriage. In the biblical times, the average person in the first century didn't live past their 50s. Think of that. How do we know that? The University of Iowa went over and exhumed all the Jewish graves they got permission to do, took all the teeth, because these are big bone deposits. They would put the bodies in an ossuary until it went to bones, then they put the bones and stacked them inside these caves, and when people ransacked them, they just pushed all the bones off and used it as a hiding place, so the bones got all thrown together. So the University of Iowa went through and collected teeth, got permission, they collected teeth from all the first century and took them back to their dental forensics or whatever you call it, and they found two things out. The average person didn't live much past their 50s in the first century. And the second thing they learned is that they had a very hard life. And what they saw is that the people's teeth were worn down because, really worn down, because they had a very coarse diet. They ate a lot of not well milled grains and all that. And so if you aren't going to live past your 50s, and if life is hard, the earlier you got married, the better, because you had longer because back then, children could work the fields and help with your hard, short life. So in the biblical times, you betrothed a girl, and by the time of 12, 13, 14, 15 was getting up there, they were married. Now the boy had to prepare a place. So usually the boys weren't 12, 13, 14, because what they did is, most often, this is the family house. It was called an insula, and mom and dad lived there. And when mom and dad got old, you built a little deal on the side, and grandmom and dad lived here. And then they would move out, and their children, the oldest child, would move into the house. But while Grandma and Grandpa were still alive, their oldest child had to get married. Remember, you're not living that long, and you have to perpetuate the generations. And so they would allow the oldest child to build on a place there as a newlywed, and then Grandma and Grandpa would pass off the scene, mom and dad moved there, and oldest son moved here. And there was the insula, the little homes of the Holy Land that we've uncovered have this interesting arrangement. And Jesus used this in John 14 when he said, I go and prepare a place for you. I betroth to you. It's in my Father's house, and I'm going to prepare a place for you, and I'm going to come again and receive you unto myself. He was using the language of betrothal and marriage and all that, which everybody understood. So the reason I'm saying that is, it's more like Joseph was probably 18 to 20. I've seen commentaries say that he was into his 20s. So let's say he was even 25. Okay, if Jesus is born when Joseph is 25, Joseph and Mary wouldn't even have their first child for a year plus after that. If you die, if late 50s is old, can you imagine you can die of a tooth infection if you don't have antibiotics. It can go into the bone and become systemic. Can you imagine how hard it was back then, where they manually worked and got injured in their workshops and had rotting teeth and in all kinds of infections? So just saying this, the median age of people and the need for having, take care of this cycle so that the home and the homestead and the land is taken care of, and with infant mortality rates as they were, most likely Mary was in this somewhere in the 15 range, and Joseph was somewhere over 18, 18 upwards, so that he was able, remember, he was already established in a trade. This idea of the carpenter, tecton. He was probably, a tecton, by the way, wasn't working primarily with wood. They worked primarily, if you know anything about Israel, they worked with stone, because they didn't have a lot of huge forests. And so probably Joseph and Mary, when they moved to Nazareth, because he wasn't, and you didn't even ask that, so I won't even go into that. So that's how we get the date. So Dale, I have no idea. Where did you go, Dale? I have no idea how old Joseph and Mary were, but culturally, Mary was probably 15-ish, and Joseph was probably 20 at the high end, and all. But you will read that he was an older man, kind of like a Boaz, and that's why he was gone. He doesn't have to be. Just in normal mortality, he wouldn't be around. He was around for having 8 children. Remember that. Joseph and Mary had 4 sons and daughters, so 2 or 3 daughters. And so with Jesus, that's 8 kids. So he was around for a while, to have that many kids.